okay, you're going to fail, you're going to lose, but each and every time you're going to get better. You're going to continually climb the ladder. You're going to keep climbing, keep climbing, keep climbing. No matter how many people will tell you that you're not going to get anywhere, doesn't matter. They're typically on a rung below you. Keep climbing.
You are now tuning in to the Roughnecks podcast with your host, Cole Nixon. Much love.
What's up, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Roughnecks podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to tell you guys about Desert Fox Golf. I've recently partnered up with them, and they have some awesome products that you definitely want to check out. They have something called the Phone Caddy, which is the best phone holder in golf. It comes in many different colors, and they even have ones with funny sayings on it, like, I work to support my golf habit, and it takes a lot of balls to play like me. If you are like me and like to use a golf app while you're playing, then this is the thing for you, because it holds your phone in a convenient location right on the golf cart. They even have a cigar holder attachment for it. One of my favorite things is their drink aid tumblers. They have these awesome 17-ounce stainless tumblers with a screw-on lid to hold your favorite beverage while playing around a golf. They have different versions from the classic swing aid to nurse aid, hunting aid, fishing aid, and my personal favorite design, the Patriot Aid tumbler. Head over to desertfoxgolf.com and use the promo code Roughnecks for 10% off your order. But let's get into today's guest. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Roughnecks podcast. This is episode 153, and joining me today is a guest that I've been excited to bring on for a long time. But without further ado, Alan Odinson, welcome to the Roughnecks podcast, finally.
Hey, how's it going, man? Great to be here.
Yeah, I originally found you actually through the Pursuit podcast. For my local listeners, that's through Vance Outdoors, and that's a big thing around in our area. But that's where I originally heard you, and I started following you on social media, kind of seeing your stuff. And when I heard you talking on the Pursuit about the stuff that you were doing, I was like, I got to know more about this because it's really cool. It's kind of different than what most people would think of. So I just had to bring you on after listening to that episode. Yeah,
that's awesome, man. I've been doing what I've been doing for quite a while now, just kind of off and on. It's I try to keep my interest varied, so I'm constantly kind of on to the next thing. It's kind of like a weird form of productive ADHD in a way, I guess, but it keeps me going, man. I'm always looking for the next thing, looking to do something new.
Yeah, for those we'll just go get into it before, but for those listeners who don't know who you are, just kind of give a little background on yourself to let the listeners know who you are and kind of what you do.
Yeah, so guys, it's kind of a weird place to start at. So, like, for me, I run the business Odinson Archery. And that's kind of like my primary business. So basically with Odinson Archery is I make bows, archery gear. I also have started recently like making knives and axes and all kind of stuff like that as well. But I started that like a few years ago kind of as a weird hobby. It was just I was working like security jobs. I've always kind of done like security oriented work. And I had a security job that had me basically at an abandoned plant for 12 hours a day, nobody there, just in a little small guard shack. And I started kind of learning about bow making, and I said, I kind of need something to do while I'm out here. There was no TV really, so it was the most boring job you could possibly imagine. And I just started kind of learning and reading and trying to figure stuff out. And I started working with bows, and kind of if I go back and look at like my original stuff that I was making then, and it's like night and day. I mean, it's crazy the difference between everything now. But through trial and error, lots of failures, and just kept working on it. And a funny story is that I actually ended up losing that job right before Christmas. So they called us and just kind of like canceled it out on us. And they're like, oh yeah, by the way, you're not working here anymore. None of you are. And I was like, well, what happened? They're like, well, we lost the contract. And they just kind of let us go. And I said, well, I got to find some way to make some money. And somebody said, hey, why don't you try selling your bows? And I was like, oh, I'll see. And one thing led to another, and you just kind of started putting myself in the right places and really working. And I'm not by trade like a businessman. Like that's not my thing. And that's the other thing that I've been kind of learning along the way also. So yeah, I started with that. I do a lot of different things too. I teach, if people follow me on social media, especially like on IG, I post a lot. I teach martial arts multiple times a week, and I do that also. So I've been doing that longer than I've been making bows. So yeah, I mean, I keep it very, very eclectic. I'm all over the place. It's tough for me to really pin down exactly what I do, because I try my best to do about everything.
One of the things, through all that I really like that you talked about is like, your original stuff that you're making, you look back and it's kind of like nowhere near what you're doing now. And I like trial and error and learning through like you had failures and setbacks. Like that's normal for a lot of, like, that's what you kind of need to expect if you're going into something new. I mean, I had it with this podcast. This is my second attempt at a podcast. Like you learn through your failures and the things that did and didn't work. And that's why, having an actual product like you do, you have prototypes of things that you personally have tested. I'm sure like you've made things and tested them, and some of them, probably a lot of them, haven't worked. And that's normal. That's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell everybody, I say, every success that I've ever had, the foundation of that success is built on failure. It's all just, I mean, I have failed more than I've won. And I think that's one thing that kind of keeps a lot of people from pursuing things that they enjoy, like their dreams and what they really, truly, their passion that they love. And a lot of people, they have a fear of failure. That's the first thing. But then when that failure actually comes, it's so easy to quit. A lot of people will say things like quitting's not an option. And yes, it is. It's absolutely is. It's the easiest option. Quitting is the easiest thing you can do. Just quit. You don't have to do it anymore. But, it's all about your perseverance. Are you willing to ride that roller coaster that you're going to have? You're not going to find any successful person that really poured their heart into their passion who is not willing to take the lumps that comes with it. It's the same with, like, I was teaching martial arts last night. And, I was telling everybody, I said, listen, I said, this phase that you guys are at, this is the escape phase. This is the phase where you're not tapping guys out, and you're not winning all the time. This is where maybe you didn't get tapped, but you're just spending the whole time trying to escape. And that's important, because you're going to fail. You're going to get caught. You're going to lose a lot, but that's important. That is part of the process. And a lot of people don't have the fortitude to go through that process.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if Thomas Edison would have stopped after a failure. Imagine if Albert Einstein would have stopped after a failure. Like, if those guys would have stopped, they've talked about, there's quotes from them of like how many failures they had, but those failures are the reason that the success happened. Like you're going to have failures, and it's normal. But I wanted to kind of go into, the bows that you make first, like, because you make them out of PVC, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like with the PVC, that's one of the things a lot of people, when I tell people all the time, I said, listen, I said a PVC bow, a standard PVC bow is not difficult to make. Anyone can do that. That's not a problem. The problem is making something that's high quality, that's going to last and still going to perform like a regular bow. And that's one of the things that differentiates me from a lot of people. A lot of guys that make PVC bows, they make them, and that's that. But they're not even willing, again, putting yourself out there, willing to test them and put them out there for, like I've told people before, my stuff's been tested. Recoil Magazine's tested it, Recoil Off Grid, Backwoods Survival Guide. And that was a stressful time for me, because I'm like, man, if I send this to get tested and it breaks, if the process wasn't done right, great. That's a wonderful first impression. But yeah, so basically what I do is I've got to deal with the manufacturer that works with me, that gets me more of the highest, purest grade PVC you can get. That's one of the weird things about this whole journey is I learned more about PVC than I ever cared to know. I'm not a plumber, so like I started learning about it and learning that it's not all made the same. It's kind of the material is just kind of thrown together. The percentages are never perfect, but I managed to get in touch with a distributor that could get me close to about a 99% pure grade. And so that was like a step one. And then and that PVC is costly and it's not your Home Depot. So and then I started working on a process of making it more durable and hardening it up some and working on a treatment process and then you get into the fact of like strings. A lot of people that were making strings, they would just use like 550 paracord, and you can do that, but it's a very low performance string. It's not going to work very well. So I had to learn how to make strings. Now that was my next thing. Let me learn how to do a Flemish twist. And so I started doing that, and you start learning all the little ins and outs of it to really get good with it. Some people will make like jigs and everything where they can put it in there and you can flatten it and all that stuff. I don't even do that. Every single portion of it, from the flattening to the bends, every single portion is done by hand. That way, if I'm doing it that way, I know it's going to be right, because I know where the bend's at and I can feel the limb and tell, okay, there's a fragile spot here. Let me see if I can work with that. And being able to do that is actually put my stuff to where when I run it through like chronographs and we're testing speed, I mean, I'm pulling speeds, equal to or faster than a lot of the bows you're spending like $500, $600 on at the store. And I've run them. I've run the test on them. I got 40-pound bows that can outrun like 60-pound long bows. It's just a process. Again, we go right back to the whole failure thing. It was just constantly just working and trying to figure out where that sweet spot was where you had a good high performance bow.
How long would you say it kind of took you to almost master that? Like kind of like be able to tell, like just have that feeling for it. How many bows do you think you made before you really truly think you figured it out?
Oh man, gosh, it was probably it was several years worth at the very least. That may even be a little bit of my ego talking, that it didn't take me that long to do it, to get it right, but definitely like several years of it. Because a lot of it when I was starting I was using a lot of hand tools and stuff too. So that made the process even longer. So even just learning initially, starting out, like everybody that messes around with PVC, they use like the like heat guns and things like that. Well, even that process, most people burn the pipe when they do it, but then, you start learning, well, if I set it to this heat, I'm going to mess up you're going to start messing with the structural integrity of it. So then you start, working on, well, let me see if I can work on a heat box. So now I'm going to do a heat box so it doesn't slow heat. Then we're going to treat it and cool it down at a certain temperature. So, you start kind of like playing all these little trial and error games to try and figure things out. And you're learning the composition of things. But it takes a while, it's not something that you can just, pick up and make something that's really going to be like high performance, something that, I sell them to people who hunt worldwide. I've sold them to guys in South Africa that do kudu hunting out there. And, I have to give them something that's going to work, because the last thing you want is a low performance bow where the guy goes to make an ethical kill and then the arrow doesn't stick in good, or it doesn't get full penetration. And there's so many like ins and outs. And I want to see, as much as I want to sell a product, I also want to get success stories too. I want those guys telling me, man, I took your bow out and I brought home this deer, I brought home this hog or whatever. That's important to me too. A lot of times as a business owner, the only time you only hear from customers is when something bad happens, right? They're like, they're like, man, this thing's a piece of junk or whatever. They're going to complain, and I want to hear the success stories too. I deal enough with issues with customer service. I like to hear the success stories. I like it when people send me a video of their kid shooting their first bullseye or something. That to me, man, that just makes my day. I usually post those things up because that's the kind of stuff I like seeing, So, but the process itself, really getting good with it, man. I would say I've never truly mastered it. There's always more I can learn. So it's just the process just keeps going.
How long does it typically take you to make one bow from start to finish?
Start to finish, usually. So I have separate phases. So I will run. I'll do a heating treatment to get it set. Then I'll typically do a heat and flattening process, and then I'll treat it again. Then I go through the shaping process, getting everything cut out. Then I'm shaping it again, and getting it treated. Getting it treated again. So there's multiple stages that I go through, and then the final stage is actually the testing phase, and that's one thing a lot of people don't really realize. Like before their bow goes to them, I've probably shot about 25, 30 arrows through it myself. One, just because it's fun, but two, it also lets me know, okay, is it tuned right? What's the speeds on it? Does it stack at the rear of the draw? Which that's important. People that don't know about that, that's basically how much, when I'm drawing it back, do I feel all the way arrive at the back of the draw? So all those things are important. Usually, what I tell people, and this is typically because of my order volume, I usually tell people to give me about roughly 3 weeks or so. Usually that 3-week part is around the sweet spot. But usually if I'm just working on a single bow and I don't have anything else to work on at all, I can usually get it done in a week and a half, 2 weeks. But usually I have an order volume and I'm doing one and letting it dry and cool while I'm doing another. And so it's a process that usually takes longer. And then you run into issues with supply chain. Now everybody's always supply chain this, supply chain that. You run into that stuff too, and that tends to slow me down, because that's the other thing too. Even though we're talking about bows, like even the strings, I don't buy the strings. I buy the big spool and I hand do every single string. So 16 strand with a Flemish twist, I hand do those. The arrows, those come in blank carbon shafts. I build the arrows, fletch them myself. So all that stuff gets done by me. So that's the thing they don't realize. When I say it's done, almost all of it is done by me. If I could manufacture the PVC, I'd do that too.
Yeah, which right now I'm sure you had. I mean, my job outside of this is I install fiberglass in-ground pools, and we saw the PVC shortage and then the cost increase and everything after COVID. And it gets, and especially, how was that time for you too? Especially, after or dealing with that during COVID, how did you handle that business wise? You probably had a shortage, you probably had a cost increase. How did that go for you?
Yeah, and this is what really got me with that, and it's actually still something I'm struggling with today. Is so oddly enough, during COVID, that was actually at the height of it, was actually my best year ever. But I think it was because a lot of people were at home, and people were just I need to do something. Let's spend some money. So people were doing that. Plus, they were at home, so you can shoot at home. People think they got to have a range. It's man, you don't need a lot of distance to shoot. So I did pretty well with that. Now the cost increase is the thing that got me. Is with the cost increase, we saw prices shoot up, 50% to 100% in some instances, depending where you were at. I mean, it was absolutely crazy how that was happening. Then price for the wood and stuff was going up, and every little thing was going up in the process. And the other big thing that got me, and this is the one I'm still struggling with right now, that I still don't have an answer for fully, is the Postal Service. So a lot of people don't realize that the Postal Service slapped on a $15 flat rate fee to anything over 30 inches in length. So that took every single shipping cost that I had and raised it automatically $15. It doesn't matter how much it weighs. If I send an arrow that's 31 inches, that's going to be the cost plus $15, just a single arrow. Doesn't even have to weigh a pound. So they burn you with that every time. Where it used to cost, say, like in California, it would cost me, $20 to ship a bow. Now it's 35, like automatically. And with me, I've always been striving to keep my product affordable. That was the whole thing. Like, I didn't really get into that. We can't get into that, but like my whole thing with wanting it to be affordable was very, very important to me. And the thought of having to raise my prices, I know this sounds crazy. Like I said, I'm not a businessman by trade. The thought of having to raise my prices, I didn't like that. I pride myself on being affordable, and having to raise prices to try and cover mainly shipping costs, because I'm willing to eat. I'm not a rich man. I'm willing to eat cost to help my customers out. I still eat cost all the time, it's just one of those things that really kind of bothered me since then. I fuss at the post office every time I go down there. I'm like, man, I know the only thing that's going to help me on is on my taxes when it comes around, and I get to write that extra bit off. So, but still, I mean, it's been pretty rough. The COVID thing was rough for a lot of people, but again, here we are, right back full circle. Perseverance. It just keep climbing. It doesn't matter which rung of the ladder that you're on, as long as you're going up.
Exactly. And you talked about the affordability thing, and that it is true, because I've looked at, your website and stuff, and I'm just looking right now, like the Assassin you can go online and get for, $70 to $80 depending on your poundage. And that is affordable, especially for people like me who hunt and use the compound bows. Like, you can get into real expensive bows if you get into that. And I've been looking at them, and probably I'm going to definitely end up getting one, because it's like, that is affordable, and it's just something. It's a new thing to learn for people who like bows, because it is a different style of shooting. Like, you don't have pins that you have set up for your yardages. Kind of talk about that, because how do you know your, like, where to aim?
It's so funny. I get a lot of people who are like compound shooters that will contact me, and they've never ventured out of the world compound, and they're asking me about draw weights, and I'm like, you should probably get something around the 45 to 50 pound range, and they're like, wow, I shoot an 80-pound compound. I'm like, cool story. I'm just going to tell you right now, don't send it back to me when you tell me you can't draw it, because there's no let off. People that don't know, compound bows, they have a let off. So if it's 80 pounds, once it hits that let off, you may be holding 20 to 15 in some cases. If I give you an 80-pound longbow or an 80-pound assassin bow, it's 80 pounds at the full draw. So it is super heavy the whole time. And there's a distinct learning curve with the types of bows I have, even compared to like your recurve, like regular recurve bows. There's a learning curve, because there's not a rest, for one. So you're typically resting the arrow on the hand. Okay. And the arrow, and that's one of the reasons I tell people all the time, like, when you're getting arrows, you need to make sure you're getting the correct ones. That's why I offer the arrows, to make sure that they're spined correctly, because when you set if you're looking at the bow here, when you set the arrow on here, the arrow is going to be pointing way off to the side like this. So when you're put it on there and you're looking at it, the arrow's pointing way over here. You're like, how in the world is that going to even shoot? Well, when you're drawing it, you get that archer's paradox, where the arrow is essentially moving like a snake. If you don't have the correct spine arrows, it's not going to travel around that bow and shoot straight. So that's one of the things a lot of people don't get. Now, when it comes to aiming, there's so many different theories on how to aim. For me, I tell people, like, there's certain ways I can help people to kind of get them in the general vicinity of the direction to shoot, and get their targets, to get their focus in. Typically, I find I started with looking at the tip of the arrow when I'm drawing back. So I'll look at the tip of the arrow, and I'll kind of like learn my yardage that way. But like, at a certain point, when you've done it so long, you start getting that muscle memory, and I can literally just kind of look, and as long as I'm looking at what I'm trying to hit, my body knows where to hold the arrow at. Obviously, if you're shooting further distances, you want to hold a little longer. But a lot of people will see me shoot, and they'll see me just come up and shoot, and they're like, "Well, you're not even hitting anything." And it's like, no. If you look at like a lot of the legendary archers, you look at guys like Fred Bear, Howard Hill, those guys. Those guys when I shot, even the guy Byron Ferguson, legendary archer, sharpshooter. He could shoot an aspirin out the air, that sort of thing. And if you watch him, he doesn't aim. He always says, I've got his book. His book is called Become the Arrow. And he tells you, he says, you focus on what you're trying to hit, like a laser focus. So when it comes up, you're focused on that target, and your body learns where to hold at. And that's something that a lot of people aren't willing to do, because full circle again, there's going to be a lot of failure in the process. There's going to be a lot of failure in that. You're going to lose arrows. You're going to miss the target. I mean, it's going to happen. Because if you're an archer, if you miss with an arrow, I don't care where you saw it land, it's not there. There's somewhere in an alternate universe, there's a portal where all the arrows go, and they're all piled up somewhere. I'm fully convinced of this. But you're going to fail a lot. You're going to miss. The arrows are going to go in the wrong direction. I mean, things are going to happen. And it's just something that you have to get used to. Like with my bows, I know if I'm shooting one of my 45-pound bows, if I'm drawing back and I'm shooting at, say, 50 yards with a 45-pound bow, if I put the tip of the arrow on the bullseye, it's point of aim, point of impact. So that's I can kind of start to get that. Even when I shoot, like a lot of people see me shooting my bows and things like that all the time. I shoot compound too. I've got one with pins, but I've got another one, a compound that's completely bare. And I shoot it the same way, exact same way. I shoot it instinctively, just looking down the arrow and coming up. Usually when I'm shooting, if I'm trying to make precision, like really on point, I'm usually looking down the arrow somewhat. I'm just getting my body aligned. That's one of the big things a lot of people don't get to is learning how to line your body up and keeping everything kind of in a line too. That's the other thing that can get you with compound versus recurve or other styles. In compound, especially if you're holding a release, you'll get used to coming up and holding up high here. You'll see the guys holding up with the arrow there for that release. Well, with recurve, you'll end up tearing your shoulders up doing that. So a lot of times it's best to keep everything kind of in line, so you got a good strong back pull in there, and then it just becomes learning to adjust your elevation if you keep everything in a straight line. So I could probably talk about accuracy stuff like forever. I've had so many people ask me about that. And then if we flip the bill and say, all right, now let's try thumb draw, where you got the arrow on the opposite side, whole new can of worms. So there's so much more you can learn from these style bows that I sell.
The big thing, I think, with if you're anybody listening that is into archery, no matter what kind of bow you shoot, the big thing though is practice. Like, you have to get out and shoot, and especially if you're a hunter, I feel like most of the archery hunters understand that. Like, you have to go out and practice. It's not just like, oh, it's opening day, I'm going to go out with my bow. Like, you're more than likely either going to miss or make a bad shot. I mean, most people, that's what's going to happen. It comes down to practice. How much do you shoot your bows like during a week?
Oh man, just in my own spare time, I would easily say, when I'm working in my shop every day, I would probably say probably a day, probably about anywhere from 75 to 100 arrows. I mean, because I don't have like a super long space to shoot. So, and me, if anybody see me shoot, I'm usually cranking them out pretty good. And, I'll make my shots and then go pull the arrows and walk back, because I'm waiting on something to dry or paint to dry or whatever. And I'm like shooting some arrows, and I'll go and get it. And maybe I'll get the whim to work on a different technique or something like that. So I shoot a good bit of arrows. And a lot of people will see me shooting like lighter bows too. And they'll ask the question, they're like, well, yeah, that bow looks like it's only like 30 pounds. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. I said, when you're working on your form and you're working on like practice, uh, the weight of the bow is not an issue. I'm trying to build the mental software to know where I need to hold and everything like that. When it comes time to shoot something heavier, then I'll move up and I'll move to something heavy. Then I'm working on. I've already installed the software. Now I'm gonna start working on the hardware and getting all this stuff lined up and the power and how I'm gonna set into my anchor. All those different things start happening. So yeah, I shoot a good bit of arrows. I try to stay active in shooting. Sometimes I get tied up in work and I start working on other projects. But I would say probably in a week's time, I would say easily 300 to 400 arrows a week that I'm sending. So I mean, it's with the closer range that you shoot at too. A lot of the guys, if you look at some of the best bear bowmen in the world, the guys that really shoot precision archery, they don't shoot at long distance. They shoot very, very short distances. And the whole purpose of that is they're solely focused on form. They're worried about form and nothing else, making sure that form is perfect. If you put the arrow consistently at a short range in the exact same spot over and over and over and over again, then you know your form's lined up. And again, once you get the form down, then it just becomes starting to adjust your elevation and learning where those mental marks are.
On the same way, like when it comes to shooting my bow, when I go out and shoot, the first thing I do is shoot close because you want to get that form, like you want to almost remind your body, like, hey, this is what's going on. You shoot close, and if I'm not hitting consistently, then I'm still shooting there to try and get my form back, and then you can move back and work your way back. It's not shoot far and then work your way up. You got to start close and work your way back. And you keep talking about, your little where you have to shoot. It's a small area, but people see it on your Instagram and everything of you shooting and throwing your knives and everything. Kind of talk about what is that area like, because you have a lot of different things in that area, it seems like.
Yeah, I've got so that place initially before I started teaching at one of the local martial arts schools here. That building actually used to be my private dojo. So I used to actually teach martial arts in that building initially. And as a matter of fact, there's some old videos of me up and I'm shooting. You'll see like mats and stuff on the wall and all that. And that was where I taught people at. And once I stopped doing that and I converted it over to my shop area. I set up a knife throwing target there because I went out and on a whim did some axe throwing. I said, this is fun. I think I'll try this. So I started doing some axe throwing and then I started doing some knife throwing. And, I set the space up at a distance and, it's 10, 12 yards. It's not super far, but usually I don't even shoot like the full distance that I have the ability to shoot at. So I try to keep it kind of close. I have multiple targets. A lot of people don't see it, but I have multiple targets like set up over there that are different heights and different shapes and all that. Some of them are strictly for precision type stuff, so they'll have dots on them everywhere. Where I'm trying to hit. I'll grab 10 arrows and I got 10 dots, and I'm trying to hit the dots, each and every dot, and one shot per dot. And my goal is to try and get all 10, and that sort of thing. And so it's not like a huge space. But it's plain enough. Like half of it is it's got all my stuff that I work on, there, and then the other half is kind of like my play area. So that's the knife throwing target. I've got a heavy bag in there, so I can work on some Muay Thai in my spare time. Then I got the targets over here, and yeah, it's all set up. It's all set up for fun. That's kind of people have like man caves and stuff. I mean, that will be about as close as it could be, except it is my place of work.
It's nice having a combination though, because I feel like it makes it a little more enjoyable to be in there because, yeah, you can be working, but then when you are waiting on something or you just need to take a break, you can do something that you love to do.
Yeah, I'll just be working sometimes, and this thing's drying, and I walk over there, and I'm like, oh, there's a heavy bag. Let's pump out some 10 kicks, or and I'll just go over there and just start wailing on the heavy bag. And before I know it, it's like 30 minutes, and I'm like, oh man, I'm supposed to be working over here, and I'm over here having fun. That's the only problem I run into. Remember, I was saying it's kind of like I kind of got the was it like a goldfish brain? The goldfish will like go, and he's like, ooh, and he forgets what he was doing. I'm kind of the same way. I get that goldfish brain. So I'm over there working, and I'm like, we do this. I'm like, oh, let me go check this out. Before you know it, like an hour's passed, and I'm like, oh, I spent way too much time on this. That means I'm going to be working late into the evening now to try and get this done.
That is me 100%. My guitar is sitting right beside me, and I'll be down here editing an episode or working on a podcast, and then all of a sudden I'll just start playing guitar, and then I'm like, oh, wait, I got to get back to what I was actually doing.
That's right.
So I understand you 100% on that. But you talked about the axe throwing and the knife throwing and stuff too. How long did it take to kind of get that form and that process down of being able to land them consistently?
So like it was kind of weird because I get recently I said the other day when we were talking, I was going to my daughter was getting married, and her husband now, he always jokes, he's like, man, he said, we take you everywhere, and like you're like good at everything. I don't understand, like, how are you like good at everything? And I'm like, I don't know. They took me horseback riding one time, and they're like, I went up there, and they're like, ladies, like, you ever rode a horse? I'm like, it's been a while. And I grab it and I hop on it. Next thing you know, I'm riding all around, and they're like, how in the world did you ride a horse? And I'm like, I don't know. The knife throwing is kind of the same way. They took me to the axe throwing thing, and they're like, give it a try. I threw it like once, and I'm like, okay. And I stepped back and threw it again, and just started like plowing like bullseyes. And they're like, what in the world? And I think that I have like my brain like works like differently sometimes. I don't know. Like I get very, very hyper focused on stuff, and like I just kind of like visualize how many times it has to turn to reach like a certain point. It's kind of like a weird thing. I think a lot of it though honestly comes from working the instinctive shooting with the bows. Like you start to kind of understand, all right, this range, it's going to be about this many times, and it gets different with axes and knives. The axe has a little more consistent long throw, whereas the knife is funny because once you start playing with them, a lot of people think like when you're going to throw a knife, you just throw it and you're trying to spin it, and it's like a 50-50 chance. Maybe it's going to hit, maybe it's not. It's actually more like a 25% chance in a way, but it's maybe it's going to hit, maybe it's going to not. But when you really start learning where to hold at, you can control the rotation of the knife. So I can throw like at 15 feet, I can throw underhanded on a knife, just kind of an underhanded throw, and it won't even rotate one time, just straight into the target like a spear. And that's just like the practice of it, getting good at it. It's weird. Like when I went to the axe throwing place, I walked in, and my daughter had actually initially she had worked there some. And she walked in there, and we're all walking in there, and I'm over there throwing knives, and I bring my own knives to the axe throwing place. So I showed up with like literally like holsters on my belt and everything with the knives in there, and I'm like, can I throw these? They're like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I show up with my own shit. I'm like, let's do it. So the guy walks over to my daughter, and he goes, he goes, is that your dad? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh my God, that's Alan Odinson. And I'm like, how the hell does he know me? He followed me online up here. He's like, man, he said half the people in the axe throwing league up here follow you. They know. So it was weird. Like it was like a weird like celebrity thing. That's really weird to me, to walk in there and you're like, people like know who you are. And I just went in there, man. I go in there and I show out every now and then, throwing like ninja stars off my feet and stuff like that. Like put a ninja star on my boot and like kick it and it'll fly into the target. They just doing stuff like that. But a lot of it is just like consistent, just like practicing and playing and throwing and missing. Like again, failure is something that's failure is going to happen, and you just kind of get good at it. You get quick feet. You learn that when it bounces off, you move out of the way so it doesn't stick you in the foot or whatever. I'm not as good as some of my friends can. Some of my friends, they'll throw the knife, and if it bounces back, they'll like catch it, throw it back. I ain't doing that, man. I'm going the opposite way. I'm not going to let it. I'm not going to even try that.
Yeah, I would definitely be the one running away. I'm not trying to catch any of them. I play a lot of darts, and there's times where if it bounces back, I've caught myself just because it's like instinct sometimes to like want to reach for it, but you're like, wait, no, that's a sharp object. Don't try and catch that because it could end very bad.
Yeah, and even like with knife, like, and I throw like a lot of different stuff too. So people say I throw like screwdrivers and things like that, and I can take a screwdriver and plug it into and throw it, and it'll stick right in like a 2x4. Just a standard like Phillips head. I've thrown like screws and things like that to make them stick. I mean, you can get, once you learn like the rotation, you can get pretty good with it and get pretty tricky. And your different length of what you're throwing, a short knife like this is harder to throw than a knife like this because the rotation is more. So, you just start learning to figure that out and just kind of playing around with it and, getting good at it. Having good throwers is important too. I've got some pretty good throwers. Some of them I've made, some of them haven't. So.
What's up, everybody? I hope you're enjoying today's guest. A lot of people ask me how they can support the Roughnecks podcast. So I wanted to take a quick break to tell you the best way to support the podcast is to buy and wear merch. We have merch available on our website, from hats, t-shirts, long sleeves, sweatshirts, and even coffee cups. There are even youth sizes available for the kids. Head over to roughneckspodcast.com and make your purchase today. Thank you for all the support, but let's get back to today's guest. Going off your bows, back to your bow stuff, you have all of these different bows on your website. What is kind of like, obviously you don't have to go through every one of them, but like, what's the difference between, your different styles of your bows? Like you have the Assassin and these other names for them. What's the difference between them?
So you've got mainly a lot of the styles are different versions of the Assassin. The Assassin, the style is the base model. So that would be what I would call the base model. So if you got, say, an Assassin, and the Assassin, the Bow of Men, the Woodland Assassin, you got the Unfriendly Jack, those four just right off the top of my head, those four right there are essentially the same bow. The other ones have different paint jobs on them. So they're going to be decorated. There's a lot more hand painting and stuff that goes into the different styles. I would say probably my best seller out of all of them, the Assassin. If people ask me which one should I get, I'm usually like the Assassin's the way to go because it's just kind of the all-around best shooter. That's the one that kind of it's pretty good at everything. And that's the one I've sold the most of. I've literally sold that bow worldwide. And then you've got like some of like the Comanche style bow. Comanche style is kind of more that Plains style bow, Plains Indian style bow. It's a short bow. All my bows are short bows. So it's that little short bow style that you can still get a good draw, but it's more of a more for people that are looking for more that Native American flair. Then I've got like an Assyrian model bow that is very similar, just has sharper recurves. It has a strong like reflex and deflex, meaning the bend's going one way, then you have a bend going the other way. Very smooth draw on that one, and I think it's one of the bows I would say is probably one of the ones that I probably haven't sold as much of. And I think a lot of people, it just kind of looks basic to a lot of people. But if you really like learn about like the Assyrian archers and everything, those bows were hot shooters. And that's a fast shooter. There's a reason people talk a lot about the Mongolians and everything, but the Assyrian archers throughout history, their style bow was considered deadly. The Assyrians would show up to a castle and basically send an emissary in, and they would say their archers were so dangerous. They would say, hey, you guys have got to surrender. If you surrender, we'll treat you great. If one of you rebels against us, we're just going to lay waste to everybody. And most of the time, everybody would go ahead and surrender because they didn't want to have to deal with those archers. They were deadly. So that bow is another one, and the one that really gets people is the Yumi style bow, the Japanese Yumi, the Ronin style, and that is an asymmetric bow. And it's based off of the Japanese Yumi, which if you've ever seen a Japanese Yumi, they are gigantic, like 7-8 foot tall. They're huge bows. small limb at the bottom, big limb at the top. And that style, I tend to find that people either love it or they hate it. My wife loves the Yumi, loves the feel of it. But other people, man, I like the feel of them. A lot of people get them, they just don't like the way it feels. It feels kind of strange. But the way the limb design is, it gives you the ability to shoot at really fast speeds at lower draw weights. So that's one of the things that's really cool about it. And a lot of people, I get the question all the time, so I'm sure somebody's probably wondering why in the world you have a short limb then a tall limb. So I'll answer that question real quick in case anybody's wondering. Typically, the Japanese archers were fighting on horseback a lot of times too. So if you think about it, you're on a horseback, if you have two long limbs, it's hard to shoot on both sides of the horse. You're going to hit the horse. So the short limb on the bottom allowed them to shoot one way and clear the other side, so they didn't have to worry about hitting the horse. So you could have a gigantic, 6 foot, 7 foot limb at the top and a little short limb at the bottom that will allow you to still get those speeds out of those bows. I've always liked them. They feel really good to me. It's a very, very, of all the designs I made, that was the most difficult one to really get right, because it's so odd, and you don't really find a lot of instructions on making those. I would say probably that and the repeating crossbow I made, the Chokunu. Those are probably the ones that were the most difficult ones that I did. But as far as from a speed perspective, most of them perform close to the same speeds. A few of them, depending, are going to be a little hotter than the others, but they're all trucking pretty good.
Of all the bows, would you recommend like the Assassin for somebody that's just starting out, or is there a different bow that you would recommend?
I usually recommend to people when they're just starting out, I'm like, yeah, go with the Assassin bow. All around best shooter, sold all over the place. I can do them in any draw weight too. That's what people don't get all the time too. Like I can do, I've made Assassin bows that are 20 pounds for kids, and I've made them as heavy as 100 pounds for adults. But I don't hardly do that anymore, because most of those guys that order those, they get mad at me because a lot of them can't even string it. They get it there, and I'm like, yeah, listen, I told you what you were ordering. But yeah, you can. I usually say like the Assassin bow is a great way to go. That's why on a lot of my packs, like the family packs and stuff, 4 Assassin bows for mom, dad, 2 kids, or however you want to set it up, and they're all Assassin bows. It's just it's probably from the style that I probably spent the most time mastering. That's probably the one, because I've literally probably made thousands of them by now. I mean, it's ridiculous how many I've made.
And you even go to like these shows and stuff too, and like put your stuff out, right?
Yeah, so that's actually something that I recently started doing, because again, the whole issue with the post office. One of the ways I could bypass the shipping issue is just get out there personally. And I'm gonna tell you, most of the time I'm kind of a hermit. Like I stay, because my shop is built onto my house, so I can I can basically go out to my shop, and I'm pretty much at home and spending time with making my bows or my dog. That's like where I'm at there. Even like right now, I'm in my workout room. This is where I'm in my workout room here. So I've got all these places I can go. So yeah, I started doing these shows and trying to want to get out there more. I go to shows a lot, but very rarely do I exhibit at them. I go out to the Blade Show in Atlanta about every year. It's out there, but I've never exhibited one because the tables are so expensive. But it's just the process of being there is so high. So I started doing a lot of local shows here. And it's the first time I've really kind of, that's a stressful thing too, putting your stuff out there, and you've got people walking by and they're picking it up and they're looking at it and they're scrutinizing it and checking it and everything. And it's given me a lot of validation too, because, when people get to come and they pick them up and they look at it and they go, what kind of wood is this made out of? I'm like, it's made out of wood. And they're like, huh? And they're like, you make it out of horn. Nope, it's not made out of horn. So we start going through this guessing game process. And when I tell them what it is, they're like, that's unbelievable. I never would have dreamt it in a million years. So I like getting out there with the public and meeting with people and talking with people and just kind of telling them, the story behind the bows and it's kind of fun, and you run into most of the people I've run into have just been absolutely phenomenal. It's it's been a good experience. As a matter of fact, I've got in a couple weeks I'm doing a mega show that's going to be local here that I'm going to be running. It was either do that one or do a Comic-Con. I'm going to do a Comic-Con here soon too. So I always go out to Comic-Con. I'm a big nerd too. So I always go out to the Comic-Con event. So I'm like, I'm going to do a Comic-Con selling axes and I go out there. I sell axes, bows, knives. I custom make knives and stuff too. So I make all that stuff, and I like meeting with people.
What do you prefer to make, like the knives, or do you prefer the bows?
I don't think I really have a favorite. With the bows, it's kind of one of those things where if you've done it like so long, you start it just kind of becomes monotonous, I imagine like the first time you said you do like install like the pools and stuff, probably the first time you did it, it was like, oh man, this is like a process. And it was like, and now you've been doing it so long, it's like, all right, yeah, yeah, you're like half full. It's like, okay, I can do this in my sleep. It's kind of like the same way. So, I enjoy making the bows, because there's just something about taking something that was, when it was created, it was never ever intended to be what I'm going to make it. Like I'm literally birthing this thing. That the items, the pipe that I'm getting, when it was born, when it was created, its job was to go in the ground or never be seen. And now I get to take this thing and turn it into a work of art. For one. For two, then it turns into a bow that becomes like a weapon. And then it becomes something that may feed somebody's family or whatever. So to me, that's always kind of cool. Like with steel and stuff, I've always been into knives. For as long as I can remember. I don't know. I would say they're probably pretty equal for me. The knives and the axes and stuff is new. So there's a little more excitement with that. But I don't think that they'll ever take the place of the bows as far as my enjoyment for making them. I like making stuff, man. I for a while there, I was like buying bags of old toys, and I would just sit in the floor and fix toys like some big Santa Claus creature. It's weird. Like I like making things. My dad was a maker. My grandma is a maker. It's just something that's kind of in the blood, I guess.
Yeah, you're 100% right on the, that first pool we ever did. I was like, this is awesome. This is so cool. And then like, now it's like, oh, we got to go do this. Like, it's not like I'm not excited, but it's just, sometimes it's like, it's just another day. Got to go get it done. But then there's random times where you're like, man, I'm ready to go do this today.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sometimes I get out, man. I'm like ready to go. I'm like, let's do it. I got like a podcast or something I'm gonna listen to, or an audio book that I'm listening to, or I'll turn on some music on like YouTube, and I'm like ready to go. I'm ready to get out there and get the work done, and I'll get very productive. And then some days I'm dragging, and that's the other thing too, is when it comes to like running your own business that a lot of people don't think about is, especially when it's attached to your home. Yeah, I'm always on the clock. Like I'll be sitting at home, I'll be sitting watching TV at night. I'm watching TV and I go, I could be fletching some arrows right now, and I'll go run out to the shop and grab the fletching jig and arrows and bring them in. I sit in the floor and fletch arrows. I mean, it's just that's the other thing too. Sometimes I may be working till I may come in and eat dinner with the family, and then I may go out to my shop and work till 3 a.m. And it's just, that's just how it goes sometimes. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. I tell people, owning your own business and doing your own thing, it'll be the most rewarding, the most terrifying thing you'll ever do in your life. Those two things, they go together, because I don't have a vacation. If I'm not working, I'm not eating. So.
What you just said is something, because our company is only 3 people. So like my boss, he's in the field with us every day, and he said the same thing, where it's like, it's going to, like, if you started your own business, it is amazing because you get to make your schedule. You are your boss, but it is also everything's on you. Like if you want it, you're bringing the money to yourself. It's not you go clock in, you clock out, you're getting paid no matter what. It is a terrifying thing as well. And the same thing, he's always working, and it's you never really have a time to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too is this is the one thing that really I talk to, especially being out at shows. This is one thing I really liked about being at shows. It's funny, like I like, and people probably get a hint of this when they watch some of my social media stuff. I really enjoy the teaching aspect of things too. I enjoy teaching and helping people with stuff too. Just because I didn't really have a whole lot of that through my process. There were a few people, but a lot of it was me having to learn. So if I can kind of help people out along the way, it's rewarding for me. So one of the things a lot of people don't get too is when you're running your own business, when it comes to like marketing is the big thing. A lot of people think, well, I can just, if I got a good product, I'll just put it out there and there you go. People will buy it. That don't work. You got to have
Not
eyes
today's
on
world, especially in today's world. There's everything. Like there's multiple things available for everything.
Yeah. I mean, marketing is the big thing. That's one of the reasons I'm so active on like social media. People see me on social media and they're like, "Oh man, you must." I'm really not a big like lover of social media. I'm it's a necessary thing. Like you have to. It does give me a chance to meet people and help people out along the way. But really, a lot of it becomes the marketing aspect and learning how to market is a big thing. There's a reason people have marketing degrees. They learn about these things. And so a lot of times when I'm out at these shows, matter of fact, the last show I did, there was a table set up. I was set up here. I had my bows and my axes and my knives. And a few tables down, there was another guy who's a custom knife maker. I had never seen him before. And, we were down there doing our thing, and he's working. And I walked down there to him after about the second day, or the end of the first day. I'm sorry. I was only there one day. First day I was there, I sold out of everything. And I went down there to him and I said, "How you doing? How's business going?" He said, "Terrible." I said, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." He said, "Man, I ain't sold a damn thing." And I was like, "What?" So we started like talking, and we just started talking about like the marketing aspect of things. And and I was like, "Listen, man, like, when it comes to like the art of like selling and learning how to sell, learning how to communicate with people, like there's a difference. Like, you know, you're sitting here in your chair. He's sitting in his chair like this, and he's like, "How you doing? How's it going?" Me, I'm standing up and I'm engaging people as they're going by. I'm like, "Hey, how you doing, man? Oh, that's a nice coat." Just trying to start conversations and get people in. And in public, when you're in a place like that, that becomes very, very important because people aren't going to buy from you if they don't have like you kind of forge a relationship real quick in that process. It's almost like speed dating in a way. You're kind of speed dating with people at these shows. And when you're online, the same thing starts to happen. Me and him started discussing online. He's like, "Man, I can't get anything going online, with online marketing." And so we started talking about that. And I'm like, "How often do you post? What do you post? And she showed me his page." And so we're discussing like online marketing techniques and how you can start working, learn to communicate with people, because it's not really like getting your name out there is not really like a trick. Like it's not like you're trying to trick the person into following you or whatever. It's all about building relationships with people. It's all about, communication, offering them something of value other than what you're selling. That's one of the things I like teaching people. I'm like, people can come to me if they want to buy anything, that's great, but maybe they'll learn something really cool, and maybe it'll maybe inspire them to go do something. Maybe they're wanting to get out and spend more time with the kids and they can't really figure it out. But, oh, this archery, I can get a family pack. Now we can go outside and we can shoot together, things like that. So I think it's very, very important. If you are someone that owns your own business or is interested in your own business, man, it is so important to really understand that marketing aspect, and also understand that getting eyes on you is the key. Not just trying to sell and not just trying to market. Eyes on you is what's important. You want people to see you. You want them to interact with you. You want people to go, man, I love that guy, or man, I hate that guy. That guy's a jackass. I want that. Haters help. Haters are useful. I tell people all the time, man, when they start harassing me on videos, I'm like, man, I'll just respond and say, man, I appreciate your support. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? I'm like, man, every time you come back here, like, I'm getting more clicks. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm actually a marketing like I majored in marketing. I have a marketing degree from college, and that my boss asks me those kind of questions all the time about marketing, because he's like, he didn't go to college and didn't have to do, like, doesn't exactly know all that. But like social media, I'm on the same page. Like social media, sometimes it's like, man, I don't really care for social media. Like I actually just looked it up. My last, I have a personal Instagram and then the Roughnecks Instagram. My last personal post was October 6th. The Roughnecks is like way more often. I think today it was the latest post. So you have to have it for a business, especially in today's world. It helps become with exposure. I'm sure it's really helped you, people understanding it. Like you talked about being at the axe throwing thing, and people knew who you were just because they saw you on social media. And social media is a big thing for business. And, the big thing with that people, I think, sometimes forget with marketing with social media, and I think you do a really good job of it, is just be you. Like, do what you are good at, and don't try to make it look like an ad. Make it you. Like, make it show things, show your products, show you using your products, that kind of stuff, because that just makes people realize, oh, it works. Oh, this is really cool. And it helps big time when you go into that aspect.
Yeah, it really does. Like, I see a lot of people that will try to like get into like, trying to sell their stuff online, and you can just tell it's kind of like forced. It's just it's really forced. Like they're like, I think this is what I should do, or they try and copy like another person. Let's do what they do, but it's like, you're not that person though. Like I mean, I tell people, like with me, if you look at like especially like my IG, especially like with my Instagram, like, what you see on there, especially if people are following like my stories. I mean, you'll see pictures of me, you'll see pictures of my dog, you may see something I saw online that was funny. You may see something martial arts oriented. You may see a collection of Star Wars figures, or a new one that I just bought in the mail, or something like that. And it's like, that's me. That's if you meet me, that's what you're gonna get. You're gonna, we can have a conversation about knives and bows. We can have a conversation about comic books and Star Wars. I mean, that's kind of the type of person I am. Like, I try to always be as much of my authentic self as I can be, because too many people just live very inauthentically.
What it does too, I feel like, is it connects you to your customer, because it gives them something to connect with you about. They're not just buying a product. They're, like you talked about, talking to people at the shows, like standing up, being like, hey, I like your coat, that kind of stuff. It gives a connection to the customer, and then that makes them more likely to buy your product just because of the connection. They may not even necessarily need that product, but if you have a connection to them, they're more likely to buy it.
And that's what's important too, is even if they don't buy, they may know somebody that they mentioned. Oh man, I met this really cool guy at the show, and they may buy, or it's a different like process, that the name starts getting out there. I kind of like, if people have ever like, I don't know if many people have read it, but if you ever see the old movie, it was kind of like an animated one, the Beowulf movie, when they had Beowulf. If you remember in that movie, Beowulf was constantly just, everywhere he goes, he was telling his tale. Like, I mean, and some of it was like, people listening are like, I don't know if that's quite true, but Beowulf kept telling his tale, and he was like, everybody knew, man, that's Beowulf. Well, did he really do that? I don't know. I think he's full of shit. No, I think he did. So there's constant conversation. Beowulf is the perfect example of how your social media marketing should go. You should be building a story. You should be building your legend in a way. You're telling your tale. If you had a scribe that's writing down your story, it should kind of be building as your social media should. A lot of people just use their social media like a toilet bowl, and they just throw whatever shit they can down it, and what happens. But in reality, you got to start really understanding like why you put what you put, and just being you, man. All the things that make you. because you'll be amazed how far your story will go, and things like that will follow you. Like some at the axe throwing place. I went to an event a while back that they actually called me to get me to come in there and kind of help them out a little bit. And I'm walking into this place, and there's like dudes that are like special forces, and people with pay grades much higher than mine, and I'm like, oh, how you doing, Alan Odinson? So they're like, oh, I know who you are. And and I'm like, what in the world? Like really? And he's like, oh yeah, I follow you online, and I'm like, wow, and that's just you're people don't think about their life, that people think about their lives very in a mundane way. So it's kind of, whatever's happening, and they just kind of, whatever. With me, I'm always trying to think of it like I'm writing my story. How does my story go? I'm trying to not just have a business. I'm trying to have like a legacy. I'm trying to leave a legacy down for people. I want something that is people are gonna look back on, and that's what they're gonna remember me by, is this guy that did this, or he was the guy that did that, and and that's what to me is important.
I like it. I feel like we could talk about this kind of stuff all night long, but I'm gonna start to move it along into some of the final segments. I do have one question I want to ask before we get into the final segments, though, because I want to hear what your answer is, and it is if you had to pick like one of your weapons, one of your survival. If you had to pick one of your weapons for survival, what would it be?
I would probably definitely 100% go with an assassin bow, mainly because I could always remake ammo. I never run out of ammo for it. I can always make ammo in the field. I can always make heads in the field. I could do a lot of stuff with it, and from like a survival standpoint, that's very valuable for me. Because you can bow fish with it, you can do whatever. So that gives me a lot of options. Also, protect yourself with it. That's one of the things a lot of people give me flack on, is about the I talk about archery for protection also sometimes, because some people don't like guns, can't have guns, whatever the reason. I'm like, you should still be able to protect yourself with a projectile weapon. And I said, listen, archers were killing people in the Middle Ages. I guarantee it'll still work today. If you need to protect yourself, you can absolutely do that with a bow. So it's such a versatile weapon that that would definitely be the one for me. I think everything else I could probably kind of work my way around in the field and go from there. Especially like with people talk. I talk to people like that bug out and talk about apocalyptic type stuff, whatever. And they're like, well, if I got a bow, I don't know how much it's going to do against the gun. And I'm like, well, you may have just because they have the gun in the first skirmish doesn't mean they have the gun in the second skirmish.
Mm-hmm.
You can use that bow to procure a gun as well. So, there's a lot of options in there. So yeah, bow's very, very versatile. That's why I like them.
I mean, heck, it's not a bow like yours, but I mean, look at Walking Dead. Daryl had a crossbow, and that's what he ran with, was the bow, because the arrows were. I mean, ammo is a lot harder to make than an arrow. Ammo. I said it right. Ammo is a lot harder to make than an arrow. So you can make arrows. It's a little harder to make the ammo, but yeah, I agree 100%. I think you kind of made my mind up of which bow I'm going to be purchasing from you. But this kind of gets us into the final segments of the podcast, and I do have one question that I like to ask all of my guests, and it is, if you could go back in time and tell your 16-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Probably taking it full circle. I would look at him and I would say, I would look at him in the eye and I'd say, you're going to fail. You're going to lose a lot. You're going to lose. It's going to happen a lot to you. You're going to have more losses than wins. And some people will probably think to themselves, that's not very motivational for yourself. But that's where the second part comes in. You're going to lose, you're going to fail, but you're going to become better every single time it happens. That's what's important. A lot of people, when they lose, they just throw in the towel and that's it, and I'm like, listen, I know all about loss. I know, having to start from scratch. I know what it's like to fail at everything. There's not been an endeavor that I've just sought that I'm like, yeah, this is great. People see me, they're like, oh, you're good at that. And I'm like, well, there's a process that went into that. And that's what I would tell them. I'd say, you're going to fail, you're going to lose, but each and every time you're going to get better. You're going to continually climb the ladder. You're going to keep climbing, keep climbing, keep climbing. No matter how many people will tell you that you're not going to get anywhere, doesn't matter. They're typically on a rung below you. Keep climbing. It's going to be very, very easy for them to reach up and grab you and pull you off that ladder than it is for you to reach down and pull them up. So, keep climbing. Believe in yourself. That's one of the hardest things a lot of people don't get is that personal belief, man. Like that you can do it. That people tell me all the time, like, oh man, I don't know how you do it. Everything. It's like it's hard. It's not easy. But if it was easy, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah, it's supposed to be hard, and going back to the failures, you're going to have more failures. You're going to have all these failures. That's called life. Like, if you don't have failures, you're living too much in your comfort zone. You didn't really ever put yourself out there, and you're never really going to live to your full potential, I feel like. And I've said it so many times on this podcast that you will learn more from your failures than you ever will your successes. I mean, look at you. If you would have never lost your job, would you have ever maybe even started this business and be in the position that you are today? It all works out for a reason. Take those failures and learn from them.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is I'm never comfortable with like where I'm at, and I'm very much a realist. I understand that things can happen, and this business that I've been building and growing and everything for years, it could fail too. Something could happen. Something could happen and it could fail too. And the fact that I understand that always has my mind planning ahead. There's always other things I can do. What else can I do? I'm constantly looking for the next thing to do. Do I think I'll probably be building bows for the rest of my life? Probably not. I'm probably going to eventually transition to something else. Whether it's a different style of bow, different materials, I mean, who knows? I'm always looking to add to that repertoire. I'll always want that toolbox to constantly be getting new tools, getting better tools. When you have a toolbox, you don't trade the tools you got for worse tools. You get better tools as you get more experience. And that's exactly how I'm looking at it. I'm constantly looking at ways I can evolve what I'm doing. You either evolve or you dissolve. It's really simple.
Evolve or dissolve. I like that. That's really good. And that brings us right into the best segment of the podcast, which is Motivation Monday. Motivation Monday is the point in the episode where I allow the guests to give the Roughnecks listeners a little inspirational bump to set the tone for their week as they listen on Monday morning. So what do you got for Motivation Monday?
I would say, kind of repeating a lot of what I've already said. Keep climbing. People are going to pull you down, man. People are going to tell you that you suck. People are going to tell you that you can't do it. But a lot of the time, what you have to understand is that those people are not talking about you. They're talking about their own lives. That when they say you can't do that, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. You can't. I'm going to do it. And that's the difference. A lot of people don't get that. They put too much stock in what other people are thinking. Let them talk. That's fine. Use that as motivation. So at the end of the day, you can tell them, look, I did it. And they're going to look back at you while they're still doing what they're doing and living a miserable life, unhappy, and just wishing when they're lying on their deathbed in the end days of their lives, they're lying there. They're going to look back and wish they had, while you can look back and say to yourself, I did. Even if you failed, you did it. You tried. And that's what's important. With like the archery, man, when you'll miss every single shot you don't take. You're never going to hit the target. You have to be willing to pull that arrow back, you got to focus on what you want to do. Same with life. Focus on what you want to do. Focus on the end target and let it go. Let the arrow go. Let it fly and let that path stay true. That's what's important. You can't let other people sway you in your decisions. You've got to do what's going to help build your legacy, what's going to help tell your story. And that's where people are failing. We've got to live our lives to build our story for us.
We write our own story. Don't let other people try and write your story. You need those haters. Let those people hate. Let those people, like you've talked about, the people that are commenting on social media and, disagreeing, saying you're doing it wrong or this isn't right, whatever. All that's doing is getting you more engagement. All it's doing is helping you, motivating you. And I mean, David Goggins takes a whole thing of his haters like messages, puts them on a thing and runs and listens to it. Like that, he fuels off that. And I mean, everybody knows Goggins. He's insane. So like, and you talked about, they're going to be lying on their deathbed saying, what if, or I should have. And you don't want to live the life and get to the end of your life and be like, what if I'd have done this? Don't live a life full of what ifs. Just live a life and be like, you know what? I failed at this, but at least I tried it. Because guess what? If you failed at it or, you tried something and you're like, man, that's just not for me. You tried it. You learned right through that. It wasn't necessarily a failure. You just figured it out. And, kind of the arrow, pulling it back, focus on what it is, just like life. Also believe in yourself. Kind of going back to what you said, you have to believe that you are going to hit where you're going to hit. If you don't believe in yourself, if you're going after something in life and you don't believe in yourself, you're more than likely not going to get there because you failed from the start because you didn't even think that you were going to make it. The people that do make it, you hear a lot of them say that they do all these exceptional things. They're like, a lot of people told me I was crazy, like that it wasn't going to happen, but I didn't listen to them. I just used it as motivation. The last episode was with a guy I went to college with at a D3 college, and now he is a videographer for Ohio State football and works in the NFL. And he was like, I remember telling my friends, like, I'm going to go work for the NFL. And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, no, you're not. And now he's doing on some of the biggest stages in football, with the NFL and Ohio State, doing both of them, kind of like use those haters as your motivation, because it is just going to help you so much more.
Yeah. Use them. If there are no more rungs on the ladder, use their body to climb over, to keep climbing up. You're constantly looking to climb. It's never get comfortable. I always look at comfort once you're dead, in a way. It's like, the more comfortable. One of the problems a lot of people have in their lives is they're too comfortable with everything. And that comfort also creates a slave mentality too, because you become kind of a slave to the grind. You become, you're constantly you're like, oh, I just want to make enough to get by, and I just want to do it. Nah, man, it's all about writing that story. It's all about building that legacy that will live on long after you're gone.
Yeah, you want your grandkids talking about you. You want your grandkids' kids talking about you, because, I mean, I look at, my grandparents and, listening to my parents talk about their grandparents, and like, there's a reason they're talking about them. It's because they made their story live on, and they may not have been like intentionally, like, they're not forcing it too. You don't have to force it. Just be you and build your legacy.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing too. I call that true immortality. A lot of people think about immortality is when you die, your soul or whatever goes and lives forever somewhere else. To me, a true feeling of immortality, no matter what you believe, a true meaning of immortality is, as long as people are talking about you when you're gone, your story is alive. You're still alive in the process. It's I use the analogy a lot of time of Blackbeard the pirate. Blackbeard the pirate, he wasn't a pirate for a very long time at all. Like, he was his time frame of piracy was very, very short. But yet you can find almost anybody and say, you know who Blackbeard the pirate is. And they're like, yeah, it's because the acts that he did were so audacious, and he had an image that people remembered, and everybody talked about him, that his story has just lived on and on and on. So, it's easy for people to remember, oh, that's Blackbeard the pirate. And that's a fine example, using a pirate of all things, but that's a fine example of, how all it takes is your constant building of that story and to gather that immortality. I tell guys, always think about another pirate analogy, the concept with Captain Jack Sparrow, when the guy says, you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of. He says, but you have heard of me, haven't you? And that's the trick right there. Make sure that people know your name, make sure that your story is remembered. And it's not done through comfort. It's always done through audacious acts and willing to put yourself out there and take the hit, take the flak. Whenever you're taking flak, that just means you're over the target, man. You just got to keep flying.
And I think you're doing a great job of building your legacy. Truly appreciate you coming on, Alan. With that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Roughnecks podcast. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you on social media and find your website?
You can find me. You can find OdinsonArchery.com is my website. You'll find it on there. Social media, you can look up, I think it's Alan_Odinson. You'll see my Odinson Archery symbol on there. You can find me on my TikTok is actually pretty big, surprisingly enough. Find Alan Odinson on TikTok. I think it's Alan_Odinson on there too. Be careful, there is a fake one on there. I've got like 26,000 followers, so it'll be easy to find me on there. But there are some fake ones on there. So, yeah, you can find me on there. Also on Facebook, things like that. So, and if you're local in South Carolina or any of the surrounding areas, you probably find me at the show sometime too.
I will put all of the links to all of your social media and website in the episode description. But with that is a wrap on another episode. And until Friday, you guys know the deal. Life is hard and is going to knock you down just like a bull does to a bull rider. Don't let that bull of life walk all over you. Get up, grab the bull by the horns, and take control of your life. Roughnecks. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode of the Roughnecks podcast. If you liked today's episode, then please be sure to share it with a friend. You can follow the Roughnecks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Roughnecks Podcast. Head over to roughneckspodcast.com and grab yourself some Roughnecks merch. Until next time, make sure you grab the bull by the horns and take control of your life. Roughnecks, out.